Hey, welcome to Keight Krafts. I'm Keight. Today I would like to share with you a bit of a history lesson while I shop my crafty stash. Let's get started. To kick things off, I'm going to be stamping out quite a few images from a lot of different stamp sets from Fawn, as this is a Shop Your Crafty Stash project, which also doubles as an entry that I did for the Fawn challenge, Show Us Where You Live. So with that being said, these are most of the images that I'm going to be using in today's card. I'll be sure to leave a list of all the stamp sets that I pulled from for this because it's a handful. So to spare you the awkwardness of coloring, I thought I would subject you to a little awkward ink blending. As you can see here, I am still bandaged. And it is getting better, I might add. At the time of this recording, I have a little bit more mobility with it, and I don't think it's broken, but it's definitely fractured. And that's another story for another time. Trust me, I was completely sober when I did it. Anyway, so I had said in the beginning that this was going to be kind of a twofer. So we've got your Shop Your Crafty Stash, and I did mention that this is going to be a bit of a history lesson. So what the history lesson is all about is when I saw the Fawn challenge, Show Us Where You Live, I couldn't resist. Oh no. I was talking to a crafty friend, Michelle, and we were kind of going over what she and I were going to do, and I had no idea. And then she kind of described the place where she's from in the world, and that kind of got me thinking, what better history lesson about the city that I'm from than bootlegging? Yes, bootlegging. You see, I live on a border city across from Detroit, and back in the day, there used to be a lot of illegal liquor crossing into the States. So for my entry, I did a little write-up on my Instagram, and if you haven't followed me on Instagram yet, the write-up goes as such. I chose to do a card based around Canadian history. Back in 1858, Hiram Walker founded his distillery in Detroit, Michigan. He first learned how to distill cider vinegar in his grocery store in the 1830s, before moving on to whiskey and producing his first barrel in 1854. Then, dun dun dun, Prohibition movement came. Walker decided to move his distillery across the Detroit River into Windsor, Ontario, my hometown. From here he was able to export his whiskey, and on January 16, 1920, the United States banned the sale, manufacturing, or transportation of intoxicated liquor. From this ban, lawlessness was bred with bootleggers and gamblers and gangsters. There was also great rumor that Our Lady of the Rosary Church was somehow involved with the bootlegging, but that's just hearsay. So here you have my gangster beavers getting ready to smuggle Canadian whiskey over to Detroit. The history of this is quite fascinating, and I encourage you to go check it out. Seriously. I had once did a tour of Hiram Walker's, probably maybe 15 years ago, and they told the exact story. And it was kind of neat to see turn-of-a-century mansion kind of thing next to a whiskey distillery. And the whole part of Windsor in that area was actually built up around the distillery itself because it provided a lot of jobs and new developments for that area of Windsor, which is kind of neat. I mean, Windsor I don't think is that old compared to, other towns, but I mean, Canada also isn't that old, so. Anyway, with that story being said, we are going to carry on. So I've got the sandy, I think it's the sandy beach accents, and I'm going to put a couple little ripples in here, and we are going to be able to tuck stuff into them, as you will see here in a minute. So I decide that, do I need another one? I probably do, so I'm going to try very hard to snip these apart. Normally I don't like to do this on camera, but it was kind of in the heat of the moment and I left it in. So I'll go back and trim off those sharp edges later once my finger's healed. And I have a lot to trim. Trust me, I've got a lot more stamp sets that I got from the new release that I haven't really been able to use because I can't really use my stupid finger all that much. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line everything up the way I want it, and then we're going to glue everything down. So I'm just taping on the back to create a hinge, and then I'm just going to add some glue to the blue part, which actually is going to be the Detroit River. So once I'm satisfied with what I'm doing here, I'll add a little bit of glue to the edge here, and then all I've got to do is fold over the grass, or the, it's not a sandbank, I don't know. Back then, I don't know what the Detroit River looked like per se. I just know what it looks like now. It's probably a good idea to look up that photo to see what the Detroit River looked like back in that time, or at least imagine. They wouldn't have had cameras that far back to take pictures of the water. Sorry, I'm rambling. So here again, I go with the hinge idea just to kind of get everything where I need it to be. So that way I'm not really guessing and I don't get any excess glue. I mean, there's probably an easier way to do this, but I have to make things a little more difficult, you know. So again, with the hinge, I'm going to add glue where I'm going to need the glue just to keep the sides down. And we're going to go back in and we're going to end up trimming this all down because this is way too big. And I don't want to have a giant sized card. Now, I wanted to make an A2 size card, but I didn't think I was going to have enough real estate to deal with the idea that I had. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down to a 5x7. So I'll line everything up on my Fisker's guillotine trimmer, and once I'm happy with how I want that, I'm going to cut down the edge and give it a tap because I'm cutting through a couple layers of paper here. So again, I'm going to line everything up, cut everything down, and then I'll see how much I can take off of where. So I'll flip that around and take it off of the top because I want to make sure that I have enough water, enough land, and enough sky. So again, I'll just take a little hair off the bottom and keep measuring, and there we go. I think I'm good. So there is my background. And because I took some off the top, I am going to add in a little bit of this black soot to darken up the edges around here because from what I understand, I mean, I could be wrong, I think a lot of the bootlegging happened at night. And this is kind of like a sunset scene, so they're just kind of coming out of the woodwork, getting ready to, you know, bootleg their spirits. So I'm going to go in with some chipped sapphire because I didn't quite like the contrast of the black soot, but I wanted it to be dark. And I probably could have gone ahead and done this with like some regular smooth paper, but I had the pattern paper and I thought, why not? Go all in with the lawn fawn. So rumor has it is that at some point or another, the boxes that carried the whiskey that was going across the river, either on ice or on boat, somehow ended up in the river, and there was rumor that they were still finding bottles kind of to this day kind of thing. Whether I don't know if they found anything recently, but I know I have read stories about them finding a 100-year-old bottle in the Detroit River from hiram walkers. And it's kind of like, please do not litter. That gives new meaning to do not litter. Please do not dump your full bottles of whiskey into the Detroit River. So we're going to use the little schoolhouse here kind of as a church. The church in question, Our Lady of the Rosary, was actually a church that I had gone to as a child, and the original church had burnt down, and then they constructed this one. Now, I don't know the full story or the full rumor. Something about having the lights on in the church at night, kind of like a lighthouse, but not really a lighthouse, was an indication that the coast was clear and they could drop their booze and bring it over. I'm not 100% sure. Of course, the church denied it or anything thereof, so take it with a grain of salt, if you will. I'm sure there's more literature out there that could speculate that the church was involved or not. This is just my foggy old memory trying to remember what I read and what I learned. And, I mean, the whiskey tour was quite nice, so I think I got to a certain point where a lot of it was a little hazy, but I think that was after the history lesson, if you know what I mean. So here we've got our crates full of Canadian whiskey. In a previous card, I used these little bottles as maple syrup because I thought it was funny. So today they're going to be whiskey, and I mean, I don't think cider was transported. I could be wrong, I just know the story, and I'm trying to lift these guys up, and then, against my better judgment, I put them down on the wrong spot. And I thought I could fix it, but I'm just going to work with what I have here. So here I've got some more crates. I'm going to tuck behind that little squirrel there, so you can kind of not really see the line of where the church is going to be. And I'm going to drop my stuff all over my project, like a dingus. So I've got all these extra bottles as well, and it's kind of like, well, I should fill in the gaps. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and tuck and put a bunch of stuff all over the place because these are bootlegging beavers that may or may not be drunk on Canadian whiskey that is supposed to go over to Detroit. So once I'm happy with all of that, I will tuck in the last few bottles, and then I'll end up with a box left over once I figure out where all these go. I had an idea of where these were all going to go. As you could see in the beginning, I'd kind of had them all laid out, but I didn't take a picture of it, and I was filming on my phone, and I didn't want to get out my other camera, and yeah, this is me trying to figure out where I wanted to put this guy. So I'm going to pull out that beachy accents or sandy beach accents that I have here, and I am going to haphazardly cut them apart as best that I can, and we are going to use one of them on the bottom to put the crate of whiskey into the Detroit River. So I'm just going to partial die cut. I'm not going to pull this all the way through, well, not partial die cut, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through my die press. I just wanted that little edge there, and as you can see, I kind of ripped the paper. That was kind of annoying. So I'll tuck in that little crate floating in the Detroit River there and glue on the back, so that way it stays all stuck down and everything's all good. So I'll bring in a little bit of that chipped sapphire that I'd had left over on my ink brush, and I'm just going to blend all around the bottom to kind of hide that little faux pas and, give the water a little bit more depth. So I thought this would be a birthday card, and considering we are on the subject of whiskey, I thought, well, let's wet your whistle. Because I've heard many old timers say, oh, just give me something to wet my whistle with. Or, here, why don't you wet your whistle? I don't know where that saying originated from. If you know, let me know down in the comments below, because that's an old one. So once I've taken my little speech bubble here and shifted it over, partial die cut it, you know the drill. I'm going to just take that and glue that to the top to fill in that blank space up there. Now, I probably could have spaced this out a little bit better or done a landscape card like this instead of in portrait, but I don't know, I was kind of pleased at how this turned out. The bootlegging beavers and the gangster beavers, or whatever you want to call them, they crack me up, and I thought this was just a really, really silly idea. And the whole wet your whistle, yeah, I don't know whose birthday that this is going to go to, but this is going to be somebody's birthday card, and they're going to have a whole earful of a story on why I put this together. So, yeah. Unless they watched my video, then they could just tell me, stop right there. Thanks for the card. You know what I mean. So once I've added a little bit of glue to the back of my wet your whistle speech bubble, we are going to put that to the top of the card, slightly angle it there, and then we are going to take a glaze pen by Sakura, and we're going to go over the noses because I left the noses out, and we're going to go over the eyes just to give them a little bit more gloss and make them look cute. So, and next I was considering, okay, well, we've got the church and something about the light that goes on, and this really doesn't look much like a church. I mean, it looks kind of more like a schoolhouse. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create like a little light with the cross. So all I've done is stamped out a little T, and then I went around with a, oh geez, I forget what dye I went around with. I'll have to look that up and leave it in the description box if I can remember. But I went, oh, it was a sun, duh. Oh my god, sometimes my mind. So I used a sun from one of the die sets from a stamp set. Which one I can't think of off the top of my head because at this point I've gone through so many stamp sets. And all I've done was just cut off the peak of it so that way I cut into it to create the peak for the top of, you know what I mean. You'll see it right here. So it's like the light saying, go ahead, bootleg your illegal spirits. And here is my finished card. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. Wet your whistle with some hooch. It's your birthday. Let me know what you thought of this card in the comments section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me today. Take care.